we'll just wait a couple more minutes, but this is our friend Phil, who's our special guest today. And I'm excited to have him back. We did an event. I think it was our first event was with you, wasn't it? So yeah, I think it was our first event. And Phil's book fell off of the shelf of a hotel that I was staying in, and I thought that I had read everything on the topic of Kundalini that had ever been written. And it was like literally fell. I think it was one of the 3 books on the shelf of a room I was staying in, and I just fell in love with it. And so I'm happy that we're all here. Let's see, we have 6 people, and we have 10 signed up. So let's wait a sec. This is always the part where I feel super awkward.
You know, what I do, I host these sometimes, and you just let them in when they show up. You know?
Okay, yeah, perfect.
They miss the formal opening ceremony, but oh well.
Yeah, and what I love about you is you're so casual and we're so casual, and we can just sort of start, and when everyone shows up, it'll be perfect.
Right.
So I'll just intro you by saying, as I think everybody already knows this, but as I said, you're the author of one of my favorite books, which was Kundalini and Christian Spirituality. And having not really been brought up in a profoundly Christian environment, I found it really refreshing because the perspective of you having to sort of piece it together, not being in a Hindu context, was it gave it a freshness and a realness that I really connected to. I felt like I was seen by what you had written. And so yeah, the topic that we had chosen, which we'll probably just use as a starting point, was being friends with the process, even if you hate it. So I'll just turn it over to you, Phil, and
okay.
We'll flow, guys.
That's fine. Why don't we, in starting, just pause briefly for a moment of silence to ask the Spirit to lead us in this time together, okay? Amen.
That's all you need.
Moment. So I guess a good opening question for me, for the group, is in this hour or so that we spend together, what do you really hope we talk about? You would be really disappointed an hour from now if we didn't touch on this to some degree. You didn't get some help with it, or get to talk about it, or share about it. And I'd like to hear from those who are willing to talk about, who are willing to share about that. So anybody want to start?
Hi, Mel.
I'll start, just because there's something really intensely alive for me, which would make it, really timely and beneficial. I guess it was about 5 nights ago, I was awakened in the middle of the night with, and I've had a lot of, pressure in the heart chakra. And sometimes it's really painful, sometimes really maddening, and I feel restless, like a butterfly. And, I'm just I can't settle. But I woke up in the middle of the night, and it was more at my spine. And I felt this I could tell it was a round disc based off of the pattern of the radiating energy out of it. So it kind of, felt like a disc with a 1,000 beings just radiating out of it, and laying on my side. And it was so intense, it woke me up. And it went on for about 30 minutes. But, ever since then, there's even right now, I feel almost just insanely mad with this feeling in my chest and all the chakras below it, all the chakras above it. And I can't focus. And if I see anything beautiful, it just fucking hurts in my body. It's so intense. I photograph flowers and they make me cry, and it feels like my soul, there's this tearless cry going on all the time. And I
Yeah.
just don't know how to be with this.
Like hypersensitivity of sorts that, yeah, so, well, okay, so how do we make friends with that? Befriending the process. We'll touch on some of that, I hope. Yeah. Anyone else? Our focus question, what do you really hope that we get to talk about? Yes, yes.
Well, it's kind of along the same lines in that it's like I could have certain moments, especially if I'm doing my meditation practice regularly, where like I see things very profoundly and very different, you know, and it's like a whoop, I shifted the consciousness. And but I'm in consensus reality. So like for me, it's like juggling the two, like walking back and forth. And it's, you know, I don't want people to put me in a psychiatric hospital, you know, so it's like, just, you know, be cool, Joyce, you know, just, but so how do you balance? Like she's also having issues with balancing these two different consciousnesses.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yes, yes, it does. Yes. Right. Okay, what else?
Totally. I'm right with you, Joyce. I kind of think about that as I describe it as having one foot in the 3D and one in the 5D.
Exactly.
I literally am making peace with the fact that maybe for the rest of my life, I have to think about not either or, but both and, that I literally have to just live in two worlds almost, and just come to peace with that's my new reality. I don't know what else. I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe you could share, is that part of the process that eventually they will converge? Or because right now that's where my head is totally. Anything people, things that I look at. So Lila, what you were saying, you know, you look at a flower and you're like, oh, I'm gonna cry. I'm like, okay, that's 5D. And then 3D is get your shit together, Anne, because people are going to think you're nuts. So I just kind of roll with it. Like, okay, there's one way, there's the other way. Carry on. I do that with everything. I do that with people. I do that with flowers. I do it with my dog. I mean, it's just like bizarre, totally freaking bizarre.
I wanted to say something. I'm just having a technical problem. I could only join on my phone, and it's really frustrating because you're all really tiny.
Oh.
And I'm just wondering if you can send me the link so that I can get on my computer, because when I tried to join, it didn't work.
Sure. Do you want me to just put it in the chat, or what's I have your number. I'll text it to you. Well,
let's see. If you could text it to me, that would be best.
sure. Okay, you got it.
Or email it to me. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
And then in terms of my process, it's been going on now since I was 16 years old, since, you know, like 51 years. I'm 67 now. And I've gone through a whole gamut, but largely it's been about my emotional life and how to deal with that. And actually I've got a good handle on that now, but I'm living with my wife, who I've been with for 24 years, who is just really not into doing any of that work, and is not really oriented spiritually at all. I mean, maybe, you know, a tiny bit. So it's sometimes really frustrating for me to be able to connect with other people who are also experiencing this, you know, radical transformation.
Yeah, yeah.
What's your email, Mel? Sorry, real quick.
It's Mel at Mel Hoffman, spelled with one F and two N's.com.
Got it. I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think what everybody else said. And then I'd like to add, July is a year for me, and it's been a wow emotional roller coaster. Like, what the heck? And I've reached out to Kate, like, is this normal? I don't know what's happening to me. But one of the things that I'm kind of like not struggling with, but questioning, because for me, finding information that's resonates with me is so difficult. It's, you know, and my, like Mel, it's like my boyfriend has no understanding of what I'm going through. But my journey, it seems to me that the momentum is so fast. Like I seem to like be moving at such a fast rate of both healing, clairvoyance coming out, like big, like all of this momentum is just like boom, boom, boom. And I think the bigger picture that I'm wrestling with is, for somebody that's been doing this for a long time, what are we expecting? Is this just a lifelong journey of up and down emotional healings, or what does the big picture look like? That is always my burning question.
Right. Okay. So I will not have the answer to all of your questions and dilemmas in the next hour. But it's really good that you can laugh about that. And I think a sense of humor with Kundalini process is just so important. So, you know, my own spiritual journey began in the early 1970s. And I think Kundalini was, getting stirred, but really became radically activated in the mid 1980s. But between 72 and 84 or 85 or so, you know, I was doing pretty consistent spiritual practice. That was a real help for me. I think when it finally became activated, it is though there was some kind of a container to help hold it and guide it. But even so, there were a lot of holes in that container, and still are. And some days were very rough, and some still are. And I had the same kinds of questions some of you are asking. It's like, what's the end game here? You know, am I going to go back to being the normal person I was before this activation took place? And working since with hundreds of people through dialogue on a discussion forum, emails, some in a spiritual direction, there is no one normal Kundalini journey. And I think you all already know that. Everyone's journey is very unique. Some people have a very positive Kundalini experience. And when they read about all the struggles others have, you know, and I have some of these sort of brief case histories in my second book on Kundalini, the one called The Kundalini Process, A Christian Perspective. Some people have a very rough ride. Some people may have Kundalini triggering bipolar kinds of phenomena for them, you know, where they really get stuck on one side or on another side. I've been to Kundalini conferences where it was hypothesized that Kundalini may be implicated in bipolar kinds of experiences, not for everyone, but perhaps for some. So that's the first thing is, and I think you already know that, your Kundalini journey is unique to you. And so I have a few comments about that have been helpful to me through the years. Insights that I've come to that I'd like to share, that some of which may be helpful to you. There's an old story about a man who had dandelions on his lawn, and he hated them. He tried to poison them, but they would come back. He tried pulling them out, but they would still come back. He tried everything he knew, and finally, he was talking to a friend one time about all the frustration he had about dandelions, and his friend said, well, you know, if you can't really get rid of it, I suggest you learn to love dandelions. And he thought that was crazy, but then after a while, what else can you do? And it's kind of like that with Kundalini. It's like, if this is here, then we better make friends with it in some kind of way. You know, if this is going to be here in my life in a very prominent way from now on, then assuming an adversarial relationship with it only makes things worse. And I think you all already know that. On the one hand, we'd like to just push it back and be, quote, normal again. And by the way, there's no normal prior to Kundalini either. There's only conventional. Conventional is not normal, okay? For me, as a then practicing Christian, the primary question was, what does this have to do with God? Is this God? Does it lead me toward God, away from God? And my answer was, it's somewhat neutral in that respect. It can lead away, it can lead toward, but there's a key passage in St. Paul's letter to the Romans, the 8th chapter, where he writes that nothing can separate us from the love of God poured out in Jesus Christ. Then he makes a big long list of what he means by nothing, not sickness, not death, not persecution, not the sword. And I added, not Kundalini, to my list. It's like, this is another context for experiencing God and the love of God. I don't have to get rid of Kundalini to experience God, which was for me and still is the most important thing in my life. And so that was very helpful and still is. Another realization was, what would my life have been like if this hadn't happened? And who is to say that my life isn't really better now than it would have been if this hadn't happened? What kind of person would I have become? I had some real character defects, let me tell you. And one thing you all know about Kundalini is when you lean a little too hard into the negative, it slaps you right back, doesn't it? I mean, it kind of keeps us on the straight and narrow in its own way. And so I really had to get on the straight and narrow and get rid of a number of addictive involvements I had and attachments that I discovered early on were frustrating the process. Television, things that I was watching, competitive sports on TV, which I still like in small doses, trashy novels, you know, stuff that was just innocent enough, but was kind of spinning my consciousness in ways that moved my energy in ways that I hadn't really paid much attention to prior to Kundalini. With Kundalini, you have what the Hindus might call instant karma. You know, you eat the wrong food and you know it. You watch too much TV and you know it. So what would my life have ended up being without Kundalini? And who am I to say that I'm not a better person with Kundalini and the struggles it brings than I would have been if it had never happened? Now, that said, I would like things to be better, for sure. But I have to say that maybe Providence was at work, even in my stumbling into Kundalini in the way that I did, because I never sought it. It emerged naturally as the result of my prayer and meditation and my work in alcohol and drug abuse treatment centers as a group therapist. In working in treatment centers for alcoholics and drug addicts, I discovered something that was truly amazing. That after a while, many of these alcoholics who had really been beaten up by the disease came to consider themselves grateful alcoholics. Have any of you ever heard that term? You have to go to some AA meetings. And I did. I'm not an alcoholic, but I went just to kind of experience what they were experiencing in their own journey of recovery. And again, they'd introduce themselves as grateful alcoholics. They'd lost their jobs, their family, they were alienated from their children, but they were working on all that. But alcoholism led them to a humility where they recognized their need for a higher power, that they were so self-centered in the life they had before, that if they had died in that state, they weren't quite sure what the outcome would have been. So this disease took them to a place of profound humility. And listen, it does kill some people too. And AA especially led them to like a kind of beautiful spiritual humility where they could say they're glad that alcoholism led them to this place of discovery of God and other alcoholics who became their friends. So it occurred to me, can we be grateful Kundalini journeyers? Can we find things to say thank you to Kundalini about? What are the gifts that Kundalini has awakened you to in your life about yourself? What are the benefits that you've noticed coming from the process? Maybe some of the gifts are to be realized yet, or to be integrated yet. What new meanings about yourself and life have you discovered in the Kundalini struggle? Look at all the nice new friends you've made. I mean, this is kind of an AA group in a way, isn't it? It doesn't have a 12-step process exactly, but it's kind of implicit. There's kind of a 12-step process involved there. So there's still a lot of mystery about why this happens to some people and not others. I honestly don't know after all these years. I mean, some people go to India, study under gurus and yogis and do meditation for hours a day and don't have Kundalini activation. Some people, you know, open some book and read some paragraph and boom, it happens really in very unpredictable ways. Seems to be correlated with intense spiritual practice. That much we can say about it. But beyond that, not a whole lot. So there's still a lot of mystery. But the invitation is to accept the life we have as we have it now. And I find for myself that very acceptance itself is a key to integrating Kundalini, if we can even speak of such a thing. So there can be in my daily morning prayer and meditation, some crazy ache in the side that I don't know where it comes from. Of course I know where it comes from. It's Kundalini's stuck. If I can be gently present to it and just accept myself and that pain and invite the God whom nothing can separate us from the love of God poured out in Jesus Christ. Say, okay, how about there? Can I know you there in this pain? Can I meet you there in this pain? And then let it go, because the tendency is often to try to get really involved with pushing this pain. And you know, we can move Kundalini with our consciousness. We can get involved with it. We can, but it seems like a whack-a-mole thing to me, at least. Like you push it one place, it goes another, and then you're dealing with that. And the more you pay attention to this darn stuff, the more intense it can get too. You probably all know that, right? That energy and attention are kind of embedded there. They go together. So if I can find another focus for it, a more loving focus, gratitude. And sometimes it's like, oh, well, crap, it's just going to be one of these days where it hurts. Now go do the dishes, or go mow the lawn, or go meet with your client. Things that kind of take my attention off of myself and get me involved in something useful and productive seem to help, even if it's just a walk. One of my hobbies is I'm an avid bird watcher. And just, again, my attention's out looking, and after a while, I feel a whole lot better. So we each have to discover what that is for us. The bottom line advice that I've given to people hundreds of times through the years is find out what makes it worse and quit doing that. Find out what makes it better and do more of that. That's how Kundalini is our individual teacher, right? And so that's really the best we can do is, and it's going to be different for everybody. Some people can have a glass of wine and some can't. Some people can, you know, meditate for long periods and it doesn't seem to really rev up their Kundalini. Others, you know, can just sit in a chair and everything starts moving and it's really uncomfortable for them. So I throw those opening remarks out, you know, loving the dandelions, realizing it's not really an impediment to any connection with your higher power, to in fact invite your God or higher power or divine, or however you understand that, into the process. Because, you know, our Kundalini thing is a little bitty nothing as far as God is concerned. You know, it's like God can handle it. But maybe we're supposed to be learning something from this too. So if you ask God and it doesn't go away and you still have to journey with it, then what are you supposed to be learning from it? That's kind of part of the challenge that I see there. So, and then the issue of providence. Who knows what you would be like if this hadn't happened to you? What kind of person you would have ended up being? All right, I throw that open and let's see what you think about that and what your response to it might be. This has been helpful to me through the years, these kinds of ideas and insights.
Anybody?
I had something, and that is just being with all of you, and Philip, with your hand movements. I just feel a lot of energy coming up, and then that happens to me a lot when I'm with other people in this kind of a group. But it doesn't happen to me around everybody. It's like I can tune into that energy in other people.
Yeah.
And I mean, since I've been in this, on this path for a long time or whatever, I've worked like as a healer with people, and it's, it served me to be able to tune in to people's energy. But it just increased to a great deal when I started having Kriyas about 9 years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, it was like, I was filled with electricity, the, vocal stuff and the screaming and just everything. It's calmed down, but I still just feel a lot being in this group.
Is it in a comfortable way for you, or?
It's fine. I mean, I might jump out of my chair, or when you were talking about that, I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to jump out of my chair. Because I remember being in a group of women one time and somebody was toning, and I literally ejected from my chair. That doesn't happen so much anymore, but it does happen. And I just wonder, like, are other people experiencing that level of, I don't know what it is, sensitivity or movement or whatever.
What do you say? Feedback for Mel on that? I sensed just what some of you shared, in the introductions, that you have awakened psychic sensitivity from the process.
Yeah, I never got Kriyas, and then I was like, why don't I get to have them? Like I was missing out on them. And but I can say without a shadow of a doubt that I at times are so sensitive. What I say is that with the energy going through me, the electricity, I'm raw. It's almost like I feel strung out all the 24/7. That does not go away. I'm completely like, my muscles, I imagine that's like what a heroin addict would feel like needing the next hit constantly. But my emotions are raw. So that means that when there's a trigger in my life, I overreact to the extent of, whoa, wait a second, didn't I already heal from that? Like, why am I so reacting way over and above what I would consider normal for me? But I do want to say, comment on something that was said earlier, like being stuck in our head with this, because we get so emotional and we get so stuck into what's happening with us. I have found an outlet. It's like what I teach my clients: God, us, and service. And they all have to be in balance: God, us, service. So if I'm too much in me, then I'm unbalanced. And so a lot of times service, doing for others, same as how to heal depression many times, will get us out of our heads and bring us that joy back again. That sometimes, we're in the Sahara Desert, like, how am I going to make it through this emotional mess? Doing for others can pull us out of that sometimes, in my experience only.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yes.
I say, I don't have experiences like what Mel was saying that like energy jumps out at me. I don't have those. And what happens with me is because I get afraid of the different consciousness, I move away from it for like long periods of time. And then I'll talk to my therapist and we'll be like trying to balancing having a spiritual life and trying to be well grounded. And, you know, she doesn't quite get it. I know I need like a more spiritual teacher. Um, so, and if you ask like, where would you be without Kundalini? I don't always refer to it as Kundalini, but you know, whatever. I mean, I started when I was 18. You know, I was one of these people who had like just something started to happen, and then I was in the psychiatric hospital. So then you're like traumatized, and the whole thing becomes trauma. But anyway, so now that I'm older, you know, I'm 63, so I'm trying to incorporate it more. But what I find is like I'll just like even subconsciously like push it away. Like I don't experience anything like that, you know, and I'll go for months or a year or two, and then I'm back and it's like, oh no, yeah, it's real, right? Oh, here we are, right? So I can't be without it because, you know, it's who I am. And when I'm without it, it's not really me. It's not the full me. You know, I'm on like, I'm behaving, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you have this feeling of split, if you don't mind my asking, is there a part of you that's aware of the split?
Okay, that's only recently, like as a more mature woman. Like when I was a kid, I was like just taken by it. Oh, I was enraptured. Oh my God. But now as an adult, it's like, oh, it's here. Okay, I'm kind of scared. I'm gonna go back to sleep soon, so it's okay. And I
Yeah.
am aware of it now. In the past few years, especially since COVID, because COVID being alone in the house kind of brought it on, and
Yeah.
I was able to say I was in both places at once. I was aware of it more recently, which I'm much more comfortable with this as it is now than in Rapture. It was like not cool.
Yeah. 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 Because that's the interesting thing is that sometimes, you know, as we are experiencing Kundalini and some of the splits and some of the truly bizarre places it takes us, we can get in touch with a part of ourselves that is somehow not in Kundalini, not caught in the energy itself.
Yep.
And the more we can tune into and be and relax into, it's nothing you get by concentrating. It's kind of who you are, this background, non-reflecting consciousness. I call it the deep self. I think that deep self is the place of stability. And the more we get in touch with that and the more we learn to live out of that place, the more Kundalini seems to find a way to integrate too. So
That's very helpful. What you just said, it's like, okay,
yeah,
that's a big one. That's a lesson for me.
because remember the energy is following attention. And so when we pay attention to a place that hurts, it hurts more, lo and behold. So when we switch to service or praise or something, the dishes, our attention is moved to someplace else and the energy has to take a different pattern. It might take it 10 minutes to do that.
Mhm.
But if we can learn through our just attentiveness to presence, you know, that we have a reflecting consciousness, call it egoic consciousness. And for me, ego is not a bad thing. It's just something that is the way that we relate to the world. It can be changed, it can be refocused, it can be renewed, etc. But there's a deeper place from which ego itself emerges, the deeper self. People, of course, meditate and pray and do whatever to get in touch with that. But the more we get in touch with that, I think the more Kundalini actually settles down too, because it's coming from a very deep place. I think it's coming from that place
Yeah.
in the deep unconscious. It's like it's the energy of the deep self emerging into consciousness and consciousness like, whoa, what do we do with this guy? Let's try this. It tries to, solve the problem. And yet, the more the ego then learns to live in alignment, that's one of my books called God, Self, and Ego. It's a study of kind of the relationship between God, self, and ego on the spiritual journey. And so the more we get this alignment between the divine, the deep self, and our egoic consciousness, which does need to be transformed, it can really be messed up, depending on our family of origin, our bad habits, or whatever. Then I think Kundalini settles down too. Not perfectly, granted, but it certainly got better for me the more and more that I learned to tune into that and discovered, well, that's really who I am. I am that deeper self, the one who is like the background observer. Some people call it the witness consciousness. I started describing that to some guy one time. He says, well, you sound like a Buddhist. I said, well, they're humans too. I think this is a human experience, This is how we're created, to have a deep self like that and a more conventional egoic self. So
That's okay. I was leading.
did I scare her off?
I think she has to go. She might get
Okay.
a phone call. Joyce, are you still here? Okay. Carry on.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris is here.
So anyway, that kind of self comes. So let's say you're doing the dishes and you're just doing the dishes, then you may discover that after you do the dishes or just take a walk or something, Kundalini is not quite as rough a ride. At least that's my experience. It's like something settled down. I created a different attentional pattern that the energy is beginning to try to trek along. And so then of course I start messing with it. How did I do that? And maybe I can tweak it. Give up on that too, right? Yeah.
If I find for me, really the only place that happens is when I gather with you people. Like, because it's like, it's like, it just really depends on the energy frequency of who I'm with. And there's so many factors, like you were talking about, Mel, like so many factors affecting my body. I could go to the dog shelter, volunteer with the dogs. Their suffering is like so painful. This is for me the best place to,
Yeah.
before I came on here, I was like feeling triggered by removing and just all kinds of stuff. Who cares? Like what you were saying, who cares what it was? But like you were saying, Laura, it was like, why do I have to have such a strong reaction to this? I don't actually care this much, but my body is like exploding with sensation. And it just, connecting with you guys, because I think there's an open flow of connection here. Whereas with other people, I have to really kind of censor and like massage the words. It's this free flow of where the energy can be met and received. And I just notice, oh, I'm actually feeling better. So yeah,
that's right. It's kind of like an AA group. That's what I found that. I don't know if any of you have ever been to AA, but you can use bad language and you can tell all the parts of your life that are kind of dark, and people are going to love you and accept you.
Totally.
And so there's a saying of Jesus, where two or more gather in my name, there am I in their midst. This is not explicit gathering in his name, but it's kind of implicit, where people gather to love and accept one another. I think the divine shows up and heals and harmonizes our energy in wonderful ways. Thank God it doesn't take our negative stuff and glom that together and let us share that, right? No. I found in meditation groups, when we meet in meditation groups sometimes to do centering prayer, I do centering prayer sometimes, that it seems that our silence is pooled rather than our noise. And thank goodness for that, right? That we don't open to everybody else's static and it becomes my static too. So yeah, I think this is a very special place you've created, Kate. An opportunity for people to gather like this. And
I'm just an opportunist. I created what I needed.
yeah, yes.
But that's an interest. It is interesting what you say, like that we like resonate on the frequency of our silence, not our noise. And I found like even who would I be before if without this experience? Well, I would be someone who does a lot more yoga, eats a lot more smoothies, chants a lot more kirtan, meditates more. Like, so on the outside, my life would look much more spiritual, but I don't do any of that stuff anymore. And I would go to kirtans and chanting things with this experience, and it would be like, and I couldn't do it anymore. So it is really interesting that it's like really among the people who we share a very similar experience that is so rare that that is where the most resonance, I find the most resonance. And so I feel like my nervous system relaxes more in these spaces with you guys. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, nobody's going to think anything anyone else shared is really weird, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I think it's interesting, and I don't know if this is, maybe this is what you were just saying, Kate. The longer I'm in this process, and I mean, I can tell, things are changing. Reactivity isn't there. I don't get bothered by things I used to get bothered by. There's more like equanimity. The balancing of polar, the two sides of the coin, the deeper understanding of the nature of the impermanence of life, and, all that kind of stuff. But I do find that I have way less interest in what I would call spiritual activities. Like, I mean, I've never kind of formally meditated, because I have felt like I've been like meditated on for, most of my whole life. But I would just rather spend time in the forest alone than go to a kirtan or something with a group of people. Like, I really don't have a lot of interest in what I would call spiritual merchandising and so-called spiritual activities anymore. Life itself's kind of good enough. I don't know if anybody else has, notices that about themselves.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've noticed, I mean, because all this started because I was doing practices like 3 hours a day, and it was very intense, a lot of chanting, a lot of, breathing, a lot of yoga, all that kind of stuff. It's Kundalini yoga, basically. Anyway, now I sit down usually for about a half hour a day, and I put headphones on and I listen just to sound mostly, or guided meditation. And I really like that. It's like a nice break for me. But no chanting, no heavy breathing, none of that stuff. It's too much. I mean, I've been sent like over the edge, like over a cliff, when I've been a part of some groups where they're doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
We're going to have Lila and I joke, we're going to have a retreat where we're just like, we can only watch Netflix, like pet a goat and eat macaroni and cheese. Like there's like no spirituality allowed. Because we're already, like you said, Lila, I love that, like being meditated on. Like this is yoga. We don't have to do yoga. It's like so silly.
Yeah, they do these practices so that Kundalini can awaken.
Yeah. But
then there's not a lot of talk about, okay, then what's next? Do you keep doing it to integrate it, or is it like what? So again, I'm coming at all this within the Christian framework where nobody knows what the heck I'm talking about. So I'm like trying to figure this stuff out and trying to relate. Fortunately, I had a background, a theological and philosophical background, where I could kind of make some connections. But then it's like, okay, what are we really dealing with here? It seems there is a kind of an end game. It is a healing process, right? And so the more we've been wounded, the rougher the ride. We can say that for sure. And but healing does happen. It does. And it seems that it's about integrating the body as well with our spirituality. I mean, the body is profoundly involved in Kundalini, right? Yeah. And so that's a good thing. I mean, it's not about becoming just spiritual. It's about becoming embodied in our spirituality. That's what the Kriyas and stuff are about. It's about helping this energy move and pass and flow. So we be more fully alive in our bodies. Good stuff, right? Totally congruent with Christian theology and spirituality, where we speak of incarnation and so forth. So those are connections that I've made.
And maybe that's what it means to actually really be human.
It's right. It's exactly right. Yeah.
I'm curious, because I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 19.
Oh,
And that happened after a really significant trauma when I was attending art school in Mexico. Anyway, for me, the diabetes has actually kind of been a way of really focusing on my body and taking care of my body. Because if I don't, manage everything, food, exercise, insulin, all that kind of stuff, I could get really sick. I mean, I've had friends who've died because kidneys have failed or they've gone blind or whatever. And none of those things have happened to me because I've been on this like intensive self-care routine for, the last 47 years. And I think that's kind of forced me to be more aware of my body in a way that wouldn't have happened perhaps if I didn't have it. But I don't know, how others experience that.
yeah, you've really had to walk a tightrope with type 1 diabetes, haven't you?
I have, and it has had some impacts on my body, like both of my hands. I've had surgeries on both my hands because diabetes, if you have it for a really long time, you tend to get a couple of different conditions, and my shoulders, I've had frozen shoulders, which are excruciatingly painful, and it just happens. If you've had diabetes for a long time, you just get them. It's pretty much kind of almost a guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, just dealing with all those things has definitely been an interesting path. And ironically, it's really kind of weird. My wife also has type 1, and she was diagnosed when she was 4. She's a little younger than me. She's had it for 60 years now. And it's just, for us, it's like just normal, kind of. And we have like all the best technology and everything to deal with it. But it really isn't normal, in a way. I mean, it's not that common. Type 2 is, but type 1's not that common. Anyway, that's just a little bit of sharing about my body thing.
Yeah. So just to kind of follow up, do you think Kundalini's been a help to you then in your journey with diabetes? Is that something of what you were saying here?
I think Kundalini has forced me to look at everything and deal with everything. And since there was so much trauma, it's led to a situation where I've been in therapy for since I was 30. And there's been a lot of processing and a lot of intensive work. Like I went to this trauma intensive for 6 days, 6 hours a day, where I did art therapy and I've done psychedelic therapy and I've done all kinds of therapy. And I kind of finally feel like maybe this is like my time of life to enjoy life, because I haven't really enjoyed life that much. It's been pretty rough. And somehow, Kundalini has contributed to the blessings, which have been like being able to really connect with people and work with people and see transformation and do my art, do my photography. My daughter is just this amazing person, and I'd like to think that being in my womb with active Kundalini probably had something to do with that. I mean, I feel blessed in so many ways, and yet my life has been extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing about all that. Yeah.
I'm having an interesting, speaking of body and food, I just left it on gallery because we're a small group. Is that okay for everybody? Okay, I got sick of like pinning. I know there's a way to set it up, but I haven't figured it out yet. Where I have some interesting thing with my body where like, okay, Kundalini is showing me that I've had food issues my whole life. Like I have been thinking about food like all day, my entire life. And so all my food issues are up. And so I'm eating more and eating worse than I ever had. Because I'm really like being like, let's get to the root of this. Let's figure like, what are you showing me? Okay, I'm judging about myself here. I think I need to eat this, but I don't want to. So then there's a rebellious part. Like it's just a whole world of characters in my head related to food. So I'm like, I haven't solved it yet. So I'm like eating worse than I ever have probably. And so I'm feeling worse than I ever have. So it's like I'm stuck because I'm so sensitive to things that I could I would have been able to get away with before. I can't now, but yet I haven't gotten to the root of the thing. So it's really quite amusing if I actually step back, but it's also really annoying because I'd like to just like not have to think so much about every single thing that I do and the impact it's going to have on me. Like I'd like to be able to just like go to the freaking post office, and not worry about like the lights in there, or I don't know. You guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you made an interesting point, Phil, about, there's so many people that are interested in yoga and wanting to bring this forward out, but there's very little help out there, right, about what to do with it afterwards. I think that's just like, I'm just amazed by that, when you reach out to clinical psychology or therapy, they take it down one path and it just doesn't resonate with what you need. I don't know. I that just is like a void in my head, like why we don't have clinics or therapists, that are doing this for people that have been, inflicted with this on a daily basis. It just blows me away. I mean, I know I've shared this with you, but I don't think what I had is Kundalini, although I know Kate was kind of talking about this. I'm on this magical mystical tour. I know that. I just read Evelyn Underhill's Mysticism, and I am like right on it. I mean, it's my story. So who do you talk to that about with? There is a woman that I do talk with, a spiritual person out in Iowa, and she's fabulous. And if I hadn't found her, I would probably be literally in a mental institution. So yeah, I don't know. That's where my head is.
Well, I mean, I've been really fortunate because I have found people.
Yeah.
I mean, my therapist had a Kundalini awakening in his 20s, and originally he was headed to do the kind of work that you do, Philip. And he instead became a therapist. But yeah, I think you have to find people along the way. I mean, I'm definitely someone who works with people who had Kundalini, and sometimes I see people and then their Kundalini comes up, and then, I'm able to work with them with that. But yeah, it's rare. It's hard to find.
Well, and I think there's so many variations because, I love this group, but I know a lot of the experiences that you talk about from your body standpoint, I shouldn't say I don't have any of that, but psychologically, my whole journey has been totally psychological, totally psychological. And it's been really maddening to wrap my head around what that means. I know yours is, this Kundalini is psychological too, but I don't seem to have a lot of the physical. I'm very sensitive to energy. I can tell you that. Like, I can't even watch TV. I have, I do Facebook only because my kids, post some things, but I've had to get off Facebook. I mean, I've had to like totally, I'm a professor, so I have the summers off. Thank goodness. Like, all I'm doing this summer is like laying around reading, walking my dog, and it's been lovely. I'm thinking, can I get paid to do this? Because this is what I'm being called to do right now. I mean, I'm like a nervous wreck thinking about going back, to teaching my courses in the fall, because I can't juggle it all. And I don't want to juggle it all. I just want to be calm and not have to deal with, like Kate, like you said, what the hell is going to happen when I go to the post office? What am I going to have to think about? I don't even want to think about what I have to think about when I go to the post office,
Right.
It's bizarre.
So true. My dream world is like everybody who has these type of experiences just get like a trust fund. So we just take care of the business of the body. And what's
absolutely. We shouldn't have to be paying bills and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can relate to, what you're talking about with the mysticism, because that's pretty much up until all the physical stuff started happening about, maybe 10 years ago in a really severe way. My entire process was mystical. And, there was a lot of, I had, a lot of experiences with the celestial realm and gods and goddesses and downloads of information. I would, wake up or I would just be sitting and I would understand, I'd read the Bible, probably 50 times from cover to cover, but it would all come alive in visitations from Jesus and downloads of the Tao. And I would understand what all of it meant, and the writing and the poetry. And then it all, the bodily stuff started to because the body wants to be involved too. The toenails, the fingernails, the hair, everything wants to be involved. And so I kind of, I miss a lot of that, even though it'll, still show up in a really intense way from time to time. It's really just the body waking up, the arms, the legs, the torso, everything, just the awareness. To me, it feels more like God remembering that she incarnated. God remembering that she's here in a physical body, walking on earth with legs. And so it's kind of this funny nuance to it now, like when I'm, walking in nature and I'm reminding God to remember, remember that you have a heart, remember that you have a body, remember that you're a human being, having an expression in this physical world. So I'm kind of enjoying playing with that, even though the intensity of it in the body is like out of this world a lot of times.
Well, I'm wondering if that's my phase too. Maybe I'm only, the headspace has only been affected and not my body yet or something. I have no idea.
We'll pray for you.
Please do.
You can certainly say that you're on a spiritual journey and experiencing transformation, and the transformation of the psyche is of a profound importance here. It definitely is. I've come across people who've had Kundalini awakening who had not done that work yet, the psychological work. They needed to get into therapy and so forth. In other words, there are ways you can seemingly stir up Kundalini-like energy process. It doesn't always last long. But in some people, unfortunately, it does, and they're not ready for it. In these authentic spiritual traditions, they spend some time developing an infrastructure for that. And when the guru or yogi or wisdom person thinks it's time, they do some sort of initiation or Shaktipat or something to let's put another spark in here and get this going. But I think there are a lot of people on the spiritual journey who don't have Kundalini, but who are full of the spirit, And someone once asked me, do I think they're missing out? And I said, should they, I've had calls through the years, can you help me awaken my Kundalini? And I said, no, I will not do that. When it's ready, it will awaken, you know.
Yeah.
And so don't necessarily think you're missing out. If this is the way that God is working with you in your spiritual journey, then that's your path. And that seems to be the way for most. Kundalini, it's not common. You all know that. This is not that common. And it's true, most ministers don't know much about it. There's an organization I belong to called Spiritual Directors International. You can look them up. We're worldwide. And there are spiritual directors from all different faith traditions. They don't know much about it. I've offered to do workshops at their annual conference, put in proposals, never been accepted. It's like, we don't think there's a big need for this out there. So, okay, fine. Because it's not something they bump into, you know. If they did, they would probably send it to a psychiatrist and see if you could get medicated.
Yeah.
The big blessing for me in all this was when this happened, I was working in a psychiatric hospital. And I knew what would happen to me if I said, okay, doc, because I was working with a psychiatrist. This is what's been happening lately. What do you think? What do you think he'd have done? He'd have given me some drugs. But I said, well, I'm not sure I'm there yet, but if I get to that place, I will take them, you know. But that's the tendency, is to medicate phenomena we don't quite understand and put some kind of label on it. But let's see where this goes, because there was still a kind of a peace about it with discomfort. Peace and discomfort can coexist. When we lose peace, we're doing that with our mind. It's not Kundalini necessarily doing that, unless it's stirring up some repressed energies, emotions or something that are, you know, troubling us for a while. But it's our thoughts. And so sometimes in Spiritual Directors International, you'll find people who do advertise their familiarity with psychic phenomenon, with energy process and things like that. And they'll have it on their website. And so, you know, there just aren't that many though.
Yeah, another burning.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've had a lot of trouble with this idea that I could change how I feel with my thoughts. And I know there are a lot of people out there who say that you can, and I don't find that that's true for me. It's like I need to get into a different state of consciousness, or a different energetic reality or something to think that it's something to do with my thoughts. I just don't get that. And the other thing, I guess, while I've been sitting here and just, you know, thinking about my life and my process and everything, is that it's not just the type 1 diabetes. I had hepatitis C for over 30 years. I was cured in 2014. I mean, I've just been on this like massive journey with pain. You know, and recently I started to think about my relationship with Christ, with Jesus, who shows up for me all the time, even though I'm not a Christian. And that I've felt so much kinship because of the degree of suffering. Like I have this feeling of like, you know, remembering being, you know, nailed to the cross, and being there at that time with him. It's weird in a way, but it's like, that's just been my path for some reason. And I feel like I'm finally coming out of it into more a state of what you might call the resurrection. It's really kind of bizarre, but that's the reality of what I've been experiencing.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I really felt that when you were saying that, Mel, like that this is a moment, like I could just feel kind of like you're opening into, I don't know how to explain it, but I could just really feel what you were saying in my body.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really refreshing to be able to talk about that, because it's such a process inside, and
yeah,
so rare that I have anybody to talk to about it.
Like an emergence into like the world, it feels like. in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Laura? You had a
Well, yeah, I was in the Christian church for most of my life as different leaders, I served in different areas. And to this day, I'm still a researcher. Researching is one of my greatest loves. So that I say all that to say, what is the relationship between Kundalini and the Holy Spirit? Is it one and the same? Is it not? I mean, I read so many contradictory information, yet every indigenous religion or whatever, there's always something like this in it, but just different names. So I'm trying to shed some light on that.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit of that in my first book, Kundalini Energy and Christian Spirituality, and a lot about that in my second book, The Kundalini Process, A Christian Perspective, including a whole chapter devoted to it.
links to your books.
Pardon?
I'll put the links to your books in the chat.
Okay. So I think Kundalini is a human phenomenon, and the reason we see it in indigenous religions is because this is happening to people, right? The one common factor in all the world's religions is these are people that things are happening to. They have a psyche, they have an unconscious level. We're all basically the same anthropologically. The way we're put together is the same. Our cultural conditioning can be different, but fundamentally we're the same. So the Holy Spirit and Kundalini can indeed dance together. You know, I think they do. I think sometimes people's Kundalini process is awakened by the Holy Spirit, in which case it seems to be much more of a smooth ride for them. You see this especially, let's say, in Pentecostal phenomenon. I think a lot of Pentecostals have Kundalini stuff going on, but for them, they would never call it that. It's just the energy of the Holy Spirit. But in my own life, I can very definitely tell the difference between the two. Kundalini is raw, it follows our attention, you know, it goes where there's open doors, and the Holy Spirit is, at least in Christian theology, it's God. This is God's indwelling presence that communicates God's love, joy, peace, presence, and gifts to us. And I think can then also, through its healing presence in us, direct Kundalini. So one of the things I do in my life is I turn Kundalini over to the care of God, just like an alcoholic would turn their alcohol recovery process over to the care of God. I turn Kundalini over to the care of God. Kundalini to the ego is a higher power, right? The ego can't really make it do what it wants. So I need a higher power to help me walk with this. And so I turn it over to the Holy Spirit. So there's some theology involved, some discernment and distinctions involved. I mean, I lay out a whole anthropology in that book that situates Kundalini in the deep unconscious and you know, tries to give it a perspective that Westerners, I think, could more identify with than, you know, using terms like subtle bodies and astral bodies and things like that. I use more conventional language like organism, psyche, and spirit, which resonate with biblical language as well. And it ends up being the same thing as gross level, astral level, causal level, pretty close to the same thing. So perhaps give that a read and see what you think. I'd be real interested, since you are a researcher and have personal experience with this, to see what you think about what I'm saying. Because the other way people go with it, as you probably know, is to say Kundalini is on the other side of the fence. It's from the dark side. It's demonic.
Yeah.
Right? So, and it, you know, when you're asking a question, what is this, the devil or the Holy Spirit? Well, there's a big difference between the two, right? So maybe it's neither, it's something in between, something else. that can be invaded by the dark side, by the way, and may well be in some people, you know, they have dark Kundalini activities, dark stuff going on with them,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Completely, yeah.
so it's kind of complicated, but it's kind of a typical Westernish response is there's three actors on the stage. There's me, God, and the devil, right? And if it's not me doing it, and I don't think it's God, then it must be the devil. No, there's a fourth player. There's the unconscious dimension that, good Lord, 20th century psychologists and psychiatrists have explored that very deeply. You know, the influence of our own deep unconscious process. I think it comes from there.
Interesting.
Which is saying a lot, actually, you know. Well, maybe we could wind it up soon. We have a special lunch going on here that I'd like to join up soon.
Yeah,
And
sorry, I lost track of time.
if there's continuing interest, we could meet again sometime in the future. And so pick another topic, perhaps Kundalini and the Holy Spirit would be one. I know not everybody in the group is Christian, but there could be some interest in that. It's something I've tried to say something about through my own writings. So maybe give that a go.
Okay, yeah, we can discuss
First,
amongst
see
us
what you
what
think of
topic.
that.
Yeah,
What?
we can discuss amongst us what topic we'd like to discuss.
Yeah,
Like to start with.
what would be helpful to you? You have so much wisdom among yourselves. You kind of don't need a special presenter or facilitator, do you?
But we like you. I just wanted to respond to you, Mel, and I also don't experience a lot of when I'm in this Kundalini sort of activated state of like whatever it wants me to see, I have to just like surrender to that. That feels like a world that I have to like totally give myself into. And the best I can do is not exacerbate it. And then when when Kundalini's calm, then my attention, I can sort of like deal and manage things and give my attention to certain things and like have a little more agency over that process. But I just wanted to respond to.
Yes, right. I hear you. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Phil. It's always so good. And
It is,
yeah, we would
yes.
love to meet again with you. I love these times we have together. So link to Phil's book is in the chat, $9.99 on Kindle. And I guess that's it. Any closing remarks? Any, what do they say? Any regrets? What's that line? I don't know.
Well, thank you again. It was really a pleasure.
Well, may we be grateful Kundalini journeyers, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Thank you.
All right.
you so
Bye
much.
now. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.